Hi, thanks for showing up this evening. So we're going to continue on our series here with the return of the Nephilim. We're going to pick up where we left off last week, where we are showing some of the tendencies for these spirits. We're going to begin in Revelation chapter 16, verse 13. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. There are three unclean spirits that are spoken of in this passage. This is called the Dark Trinity by many Bible teachers. These are a counterfeit Trinity that are out to deceive mankind and destroy the Jews to whom the Messiah is going to return. Now, these are not the only spirits that we're going to have to deal with, but these are the major players. These are the big guys. And the rest of the demons seem to serve underneath them or are completely independent from them. Now, one of these was feminine, but the spirit's gender seems to be fluid and changed. One thing that most people don't realize is that demons are actually transgender. They can change. One of these was a deceiver. The deceiver is a bit more difficult to understand. We'll be looking at the deceiver next. And then there's a big guy himself who is the destroyer, Abaddon, Apollyon. Right now, we are looking at the one who seduces mankind. So, what do we mean by transgender demons? In the Bible, demons and angels are referred to as gods. We've looked at that extensively. In the Judges, the creator God, demons, and fallen angels are all referred to 24 times, and they're all referred to as Elohim. Now, divine beings are referred to as Elohim. It's just divine beings. That's all that means. And so many people are unprepared for that concept. They've been taught that the title Elohim refers to the creator God, so anything else must be blasphemy. So much as this idea accepted that even the name of God is not his name. Elohim is not his name. It's a title. But when I try to put Elohim without the capital E in there, my spell checker makes me go in and manually change it. Even my computer thinks that it's the name of God, and it's not the name of God. But these divine beings are referred to as gods repeatedly. And we're just not prepared for that because of the traditions of man. And this becomes a doctrine of demons because this misunderstanding serves their purposes. It hides who they are. If we don't recognize that they are divine beings and they're gods, it's going to make them that much easier for them to deceive mankind. In the Judges, the Bible tells us about kings and kingdoms that were attacking Israel, and they were working through them through these Elohim were working through them. This is the way that the Bible reveals history to us and future history as well. And it tells us that it is not merely people, but it is a principality and powers behind these people. Ephesians 6:12. I know we keep coming back to this. This is out of the Geneva Bible. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, and against powers, and against the worldly governors, the princes of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness which are in high places. And I keep coming back to this in the Geneva because this is the translation that this was first shown to me that did not obscure what's being said. The King James Version, which is the translation that I'm most familiar with, and it's my preferred translation, it obscures what's being said because the translators were prohibited from translating anything that might cast a shadow on the perfection of the king himself. Now, other translations don't obscure this as well, but because this is the first one that was shown to me, it's the one that I returned to. Now, these worldly governors, they have dark spirits working through them. When God creates something, Satan creates or brings about an evil counterfeit. God created angels, and the followers of Satan brought about the Nephilim, which brought about the demons. God works through the Holy Spirit, and Satan will work through unholy spirits, and eventually he will work through the counterfeit type of the Holy Spirit. I guess you could call it the unholy spirit. But in this verse, it's easy to see that there are ranks and authorities. This is a military action. This is a military idea. The picture that's being painted here should give you a martial image in your mind. The forces of darkness against the forces of light. Now, what this shows is that there are those that are in authority and that there are those who are under them, and then there are multiple levels of this. Like, in other words, you have the general who's in charge of the captain, who's in charge of the sergeant, and so on down the line. Now, in the Bible, there are only four angels that are named. You have Gabriel, Michael, Satan, which technically Satan is a title that became a name by association, and then Abaddon, the destroyer, Apollyon in the Greek. And we're going to look at him more in the future. He's one of the big three. The Apocrypha lists a few more demons by name, as well as the book of First Enoch, but only the most powerful demons are ever, sorry, the most powerful angels are ever named, both the positive and negative angels. All the rest of them remain unnamed. Most demons are unnamed, but Baal and Asherah or Astarte, they're named, they're very prominent because they're important, they're named. Now, Baal seems to be male, and Asherah appears to be female. And in fact, later in history, Asherah evolved into a demon god in Christian circles. So even the idea of Asherah changed into a male figure later. Human beings are created with two sexes, male and female, no matter how angry that makes some people. Now, there are hermaphrodites and other sexual anomalies, but they're not the norm, and they're considered disorders of sex development. Most of the gender dysphoria in the world today is not the same thing, and it's something that's either made up, it's a mental illness, or it's a result of some other influence, whether it's the influence of demons or the influence of other people. Humans are binary. I know that there are many in society today that try to use that as an insult, but that's just a simple matter of fact. Human beings are binary. There's male, there's female. Now, demons and angelic beings, they're created without a physical body. They're spiritual beings. They are truly non-binary, which means that they can appear as either male or female. In other words, they're truly transgender and they are gender fluid. In other words, they can appear as male sometimes and female with the same being. Whenever they take over a body, they're going to be whatever gender that body is. If they're without a body, they can appear as whatever. Now, in our modern world, we see people. Now, humans are created in the image of God, male and female, but we see people and demons want to convert them to worship them, and they convince them that they're non-binary, that they are transgender, they're gender fluid. And as with most things, some people are simply mentally ill. But for many, or even most of these people, it is demonic. Our entire culture is being perverted to be like demons and not the way God made them. This is why this is such a powerful and pervasive force in society. Our entire culture is being recruited into this demonic practice. And while there's still children or babies are being converted to this, their parents are doing it to them. The very people who should be protecting them are destroying them. This leads to confusion, it leads to trauma, and it is devastating to the entire society. And that's the plan. Traumatized people are very easily controlled overall. There are exceptions. There are people that the trauma makes them stronger. But overall, somebody who's traumatized is easy to be controlled. Those who are the exception, we should support them when they try to recover. But most of these people are permanently deceived. Now, God made people one way, and demons want to remake them into another way. Now, this is not something new. It goes back millennia, but it is now more powerful than it has been in thousands of years. Your genitalia, your gender is now spiritual warfare, and that's scary considering the moral state of most people. Your gender is either going to represent you how God made you, or it's going to represent you how the demons want to recreate you in their image. Now, Revelation 2:20. Notwithstanding, I have this against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things that are sacrificed unto idols. It says that woman Jezebel. Now, there's a lot of speculation about the person that this is speaking about. People think that it is just symbolically referring to Jezebel, the wife of King Ahab. This woman's like this Jezebel was. Others think that it's actually Lydia from the Gospels, who is just fallen far. Actually, I think she's from the book of Acts, come to think of it. But she's fallen far. There are later manuscripts that say thy wife, but that is not a legitimate rendering. This is that woman Jezebel. But this is given as a name. That means that it is someone who either adopted that name, someone who was just coincidentally named Jezebel, who would do that to their kids after the original Jezebel, or it was Jezebel. And what I mean by that, it was the same spirit that animated the historical Jezebel, and she's back to finish what she started. Now, does this mean that it's a single being, or that it's a general spirit, such as one that possesses an entire group? Both are possible. As we saw a few weeks ago, a single demon can influence many people. And if that demon can influence other demons, the influence is multiplied. And this is what seems to be the case today, and it's only going to get worse. Now, as we mentioned last week, we have to be able to recognize this spirit. If we're going to fight these spirits, we have to recognize them and we have to flush them out into the open. And one of the things that was mentioned was toxic femininity. And I told you that we would look at that this week. An entire textbook could be written on the subject, but what we're going to try to do here is to be thorough enough to fully understand it, but not spend so much time on it that it becomes unnecessarily burdensome. Now, fighting this fight takes both strong men and strong women. It takes an entire society with the individual family unit for a foundation that forms the congregations, the communities, and the states. And that is why the family has been under assault. The assault on the family was not accidental and it was not unintentional, but it was an act of spiritual warfare. In our society, the men have been emasculated and the women have been turned into facsimiles of men. Women are being taught that they're men. In our world, women are promoted because it will make the world more peaceful. After all, a woman is less likely to start a war because her children would be at risk. Have you ever gone to a school with girls or worked with women? Myself, they've always been sweet. But talking to other girls in high school are pretty vicious. Most are peaceful, but some of them are very, very vicious. Most people are probably peaceful, but some are very vicious. But the spirit that we're looking at was the very epitome of viciousness. She's very vindictive, very evil, wanted to destroy the religion of the Jews. Now, I did not originate the concept of toxic femininity. I would like to say that I'm that brilliant, but I'm not. I'm not sure who did originate it, but I think it was Jordan Peterson. We're going to look at 4 aspects of toxic femininity. There are more, but these 4 will cover most of them, and most of them overlap. Now, toxic masculinity is a subject that you're going to hear about all the time. It's openly discussed. It's in TV ads, TV shows. But when it's discussed, frankly, it just distorts and twists what it really is. Toxic masculinity is bad behavior, such as someone who is abusive or misogynistic. But those who speak this way have actions that speak differently. Their actions tell you that what they consider to be toxic masculinity is anything that is masculine. Things such as being competitive, restlessness, wanting to go and do, explore, roughhousing, things like that. I mean, I can imagine that Jesus and the apostles, people walked back in that day. Young men walked. They would walk 30 miles. I can imagine they were sitting around a campfire after a day of hiking, and one of them would just walk up, punch one of them in the arm by surprise, and then suddenly they're wrestling on the ground. They're having a good time. I've heard some of these people say that if a father doesn't want his son to pretend to be a girl or his daughter to pretend to be a boy and shave a non-existent beard, then that's toxic masculinity. Even Jesus is often portrayed by society and by many churches as a limp-wristed, weepy-eyed wimp. He was masculine. He was not weak. So when does femininity become toxic? Now, there are obviously high quality masculine men and feminine women, but when does it become toxic? How do we recognize it? And is there anything that we can do about it? Now, often people will complain about our patriarchal society, yet they want to take advantage of it. It takes both strong men and strong women, but in their proper roles for society to be healthy. Now, some men are truly oppressive, and they're perfect examples of toxic masculinity. But women have power also. And we need to teach young girls that they will be desirable and that will give them great power. And with great power comes great responsibility. Some women abuse this. In today's society, we don't dare call them out on this. We'll be canceled, we'll be shut down. And of course, most of society doesn't care as long as they have their food and their Netflix or whatever. They don't care about anything. But those who do care, they don't dare speak out about it or else they're going to be in trouble. Now, women who are attractive, some women who are attractive will not only use and abuse this power, but they're going to post about it on social media. They're going to brag about it. And don't get me wrong, I'm thankful that my wife is quite attractive and quite feminine, but she's also strong. But she doesn't abuse that power. In today's society, many attractive women will brag that they're better than a boring family, and many men are more than happy to accommodate this delusion. When this happens, there's going to be a lifetime of problems, some physical, some psychological. Now, wives can also abuse this power in different ways, both within and outside the marriage. In the past, there were movies that were made that showing this tragedy. And to our shame, today there are TV shows and movies that don't show it as a tragedy, but they celebrate it. They call it empowering. And this attitude permeates society. In Revelation chapter 18, verses 2 through 3, I cut off part of that, I apologize. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great has fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. We're not there yet, but we're working on it. Our society has fallen far. Now, there have always been trashy individuals, but now entire swaths of society is trashy. And often the church follows right behind the world and welcomes it into the church. Well, God loves them, so we don't dare say anything about their bad behavior. Well, maybe God didn't really mean that. It sounds a whole lot like, yea, hath God said, that the serpent said back in the garden. One of our highest callings as Christians is to get married, to have a family, and to raise godly children. But we must be godly ourselves, not just individually, but as a society. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 15 through 16. But as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation, because it is written, Be ye holy, for I am holy. This is plural. It says, y'all need to be holy because he is holy. This is society, not just individuals. Today, our society ridicules men and women who behave themselves appropriately. You can't expect people to abstain from fornication. Everybody's doing it. Sure, we can. People fail, but that doesn't mean that we lower our expectation just because people fail. It simply means that we repent and we do better. And once again, past behavior cannot be undone, but do better going forward. And some people feel sad about it. Well, I used to have fun, but now I have to behave. Eventually, that will become regret, and then it becomes remorse, and then repentance. And then instead of being sad, you'll be ashamed of that, but you can change your future behavior. Now, some of you may not have been one of those kids who behaved poorly. If so, don't act holier than thou. That's not going to benefit anyone. You have to help each other out. Romans 15:14. And I myself also am persuaded of you, my brethren, that you also are full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, able to admonish or instruct one another. If you were not a bad kid, help those who were if they're trying to change. Now, looking at psychology can help us to understand behavior. Now, to fix a problem requires a spiritual fix at the source, but psychology can help us understand it. So, we're looking at toxic femininity. So, what does it mean to be toxic? Well, the word toxic itself means poisonous, unpleasant, or unacceptable. So, toxic femininity is a set of behaviors that are feminine in nature, but they're used in ways that are destructive and manipulative. It always comes down to manipulation. They're often used to exploit others. Paracelsus said, all things are poison and nothing is without poison. The dosage alone makes it so that a thing is not poison. He was talking about physical toxicology, but it can be used figuratively as well. It is often shortened to the dose makes a poison. The Latin is sola dosis facit venenum. What this means is that anything can produce a harmful effect if it reaches the body or the spirit in a high enough concentration. For example, water. Water is necessary for life. Too much of it, you can drown in your body. In the wrong place, you can drown under the water. Even oxygen. Pure oxygen can kill you if you get too much of it. So anything can be toxic. Femininity itself is not toxic, neither is masculinity. Both are wonderful and necessary. It's a tool that can be used for good or bad. And if you're not aware of this, you cannot spot and avoid the behaviors to recognize it when you see it in society. And I, for one, don't want to avoid actual femininity, but toxic femininity is unhealthy for individuals and cultures. You have to protect yourself. It's an uphill battle in today's world, and it's nearly impossible to even have an honest discussion about it without it turning into a shouting match. I mean, men love strong women, but strong women are not aggressive, rude, and generally unpleasant. Strong women will take care of things, even if that means driving a tent peg through someone's head if the need arises for that. And that is in Judges 5:26. That is Heber's wife, Jael, and Judges. She actually did that. Sometimes it's necessary. But toxic femininity is taking something that is good and putting too much of it into the system or administrating it inappropriately. And we're going to look at four main types of this: the femme fatale, the devouring mother, mean girls, and the eternal daughter. Of these, the first two are the most damaging, but I'm not sure which one is worse. They're both pervasive and they're both persistent, and we're going to see all four of these in the picture of Jezebel. Why did these work? Because women tend to be more emotional. They understand faces, they understand tone of voice, they understand body language, they understand other nonverbal cues. Guys are clueless. But women also tend to be more empathetic. So toxic femininity will use these to be manipulative. Sadly, the world praises these behaviors. The women who demonstrate them are put on a pedestal. Women use these behaviors to get power, or because they are discriminated against, or maybe they're just lonely and they want attention. And it often backfires, but not always. Why? Because men are often open to manipulation. When reading about Jezebel, remember that she had Ahab, and he was very happily manipulated. Now, as I stated earlier, I did not originate these types. These are psychological in nature, but they do go back to the Bible stories. And our first type that we're going to look at is the femme fatale. These women use sexuality for evil. A man who sleeps with them will destroy his life. The Bible has rules for chastity and fidelity for a reason, and we as a culture have abandoned these ideals completely, and it's destroying Western civilization. Some say it's already been destroyed, and they may be right. But these are not rules that are put there simply to stop you from having fun. There's a movie called Basic Instinct that was a big hit when it first came out. I never saw it. I seem to be the only person in the United States who didn't see it. But it was highly praised and still gets high ratings today. From what I read about it, it should be terrifying. It shouldn't be thrilling. I read the synopsis and I looked at a few scenes of it, a few clips on YouTube, and it should be terrifying to think about it for most rational people. And this is being held up as an example of an empowered woman. A femme fatale is a homewrecker. The left calls her empowered, but usually she seduces a man who is married. He's not always married, but he's in a position that it's a problem. But usually it's a married man, and he'll get caught up in trying to not be discovered. But if he is discovered, it's a disastrous situation. And sometimes femme fatale thrives on that destruction. Maybe usually she thrives on that destruction. Demons like destruction. But if he doesn't get caught, it's going to destroy his soul. If he's married, it destroys her life. It destroys their kids. It destroys his job. And the damage is wide and deep. Another example of a femme fatale is Homer's The Odyssey. In a literal meaning, the sirens lure men to their deaths. The idea of a femme fatale is a sexually alluring woman who lures men to destruction. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 6, verse 26, this is taken out of the New English translation here. For on account of a prostitute, one is brought down to a loaf of bread, but the wife of another man preys on your precious life. And this word for life is soul. This will prey upon your soul. It'll prey upon the soul of the nation. The psychological profile of a femme fatale it's actually quite fascinating. However, most psychologists will miss the spiritual aspect of it because they look at it just as if it's in the brain. But it's a demonic influence that often accompanies it. And remember, some mental illnesses are demonic and others are not, and yet they may be identical in the way in which they manifest themselves. Now, the femme fatale's entire ability for a relationship is tied up in her sexuality and the way that she can use it to control others. Sometimes she wants a loaf of bread, as this verse says here. Sometimes she wants money. Sometimes it's crime or any of a number of things. She makes them feel important when they may be being neglected. Men like feeling important. But this is a deadly combination, often literally deadly combination. They like romance, but they don't like relationship. She gets a feeling of power by taking what belongs to someone else. And once she is successful, if there's nothing else that she can gain, she's going to lose interest and lead destruction in her wake and move on to the next person. The man himself is not the reward that she wants. What she wants is either the excitement or the material gain or both. That's her reward. The femme fatale has power over many men, not just one or two. It's a pattern. If you read the story of Jezebel, which we're going to, she has power over hundreds of men. Now, not every affair is of this sort, but this is a specific type of attack by a specific type of person. Now, our parents used to condemn our music. Their parents condemned their music on down the line. But our popular music when we were growing up, if you're in my age group, was about more than just sex. Much of it was about sex, but it was also about love. Love is about commitment. And it's a bad idea to approach a relationship in this way. Commitment is much more important, but it was not a blatant focus upon the physical. Modern popular music is strictly about the physical, and much of it is by female artists in blatantly femme fatale material. There's one song, and I'm not going to mention the title of it or the so-called artist of it. The title itself is vulgar, and the song is so vulgar that YouTube won't even allow it. But this song is praised by feminists as making history and empowering women. They're praising this behavior. These are the Jezebels in the world today. This is the Jezebel spirit in action. The Jezebel spirit is strong. There are websites in which people can go online and use their God-given sex appeal to lure lonely men and destroy them. I saw one who was interviewed who said, "I will destroy your future marriage with your vanilla wife because you will be thinking about me when you're with her." They're Jezebels. Revelation 2:20 to repeat. Notwithstanding, I have this against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication. The people that this song that I'm talking about is about, they're openly using their hypersexualization to control men, control people. The lyrics just flat out say to use sex to get him to buy you a car, to pay your tuition, to give you money. And this is literally an addiction because it's the same part of your brain that reacts to sugar or cocaine, and it's the same part of the brain that reacts to sex. And that addiction should be reserved for your spouse, but people are no longer interested in getting married. And there's a correlation here, more than one correlation. And the femme fatale wants to destroy that. Women like the femme fatale, they're strong in negative personality traits. All women have some negative personality traits, and you have to have some of them. There has to be a balance. But the femme fatales, they don't have the balance. In psychology, these traits are called the dark tetrad. It used to be called the dark triad, but in the past decade, it's been discovered that there's a fourth dark trait. So it's four, it's a tetrad. First one is narcissism, which is an inflated sense of self-worth. We all know some of these. Psychopathy, which is a lack of empathy or a lack of concern for harming others. Machiavellianism, which is using others for personal gain. And sadism, which is enjoying causing pain to others. So are the femme fatales a cause of toxic culture, or are they the result of the toxic culture? If the culture were not toxic, these women would not be able to thrive. They would still exist, but they would be shunned from society and certainly not celebrated. There's a reason that the Jezebel is going to be able to take over. This type of person worships power and wealth. This type of person has bad mental health at best, but may be demonized. So, what are your values? These people are influencing young people who emulate them because they're seen as being successful. They have money, they have nice cars, they never have to work. This behavior does not affect just them, but it affects the entire society, and they're passing it along to your children. We have to be vigilant of this kind of behavior, this kind of action. Toxic masculinity is about violence. Toxic femininity is about sexuality. You can talk about one, but you can't talk about the other, not in society. The abusive man can be stopped. The woman, whether demonized or just behaving badly, is not stopped. And the end result is that many, including herself, are victims of her behavior. Now, the next type that we're going to look at is the devouring mother. Carolyn Miss says that the devouring mother consumes her children psychologically and emotionally and often instills in them feelings of guilt at leaving her or becoming independent. We probably all know some of these types. Now, a mother should selflessly love her children. The devouring mother selfishly loves her children. She does so out of a sense of protecting them from the real world. She may have good intentions, but the results can be disastrous. She will do things like limiting sleepovers because bad things might happen, or she may isolate them to keep them away from bad people. Now, keeping them away from bad people is good, but keeping them away from all people just to avoid bad people is not an appropriate way to do it. In doing these things, she is making them into permanent infants, whether that's her intention or not. For the rest of their lives, they're going to be dependent upon their mother, and they will not be confident when it comes to living independently in the world. The devouring mother acts as in a loving manner, but only when her children do exactly what she wants. When they don't do exactly what she wants, she acts in a cruel and spiteful manner. And in extreme cases, it may even become homicidal. Now, popular entertainment covers many of these things we're talking about. It is interesting. Uh, but the movie Psycho is a good example of the devouring mother. Whenever you think about the devouring mother, you think about Norman Bates' mother on that. They portray this. But the devouring mother comes from a place deep inside the woman who's afraid of being alone. It's driven her to seek the constant companionship of others by serving them and ensuring that they have need of her, and therefore they're not going to leave her alone. Having served others for such a long time, she has become controlling and obsessive. often to the point of violence in order to exert this control over others. And then, having preyed on her family and friends, especially her own children, she becomes codependent. Her dependents rely on her for their needs, which is what she desires, but she relies on them equally for her own controlling and emotional needs. Now, this need for control becomes like a drug. She's going to smother her children with love, and this will stunt their ability to grow and develop as capable human beings in the world. They're going to be forever dependent. And if the child ever tries to leave, the devouring mother will instill guilt. The devouring mother uses incredible powers of emotional manipulation. Now, our society focuses on mothers who are actively abusive, and it focuses upon neglectful mothers. They're not feeding their children, taking care of them, and rightly so. We should be concerned about that. But devouring mothers are just as bad, just in a different way. And in some ways, they may even be worse. They're overprotective, they're manipulative, they're overinvolved, and they're controlling, and they're going to create dependence by using guilt. Now, there's 11 signs that you may have a devouring mother. You're afraid of growing up. You find it difficult to maintain relationships. You depend on your mother. You end up in codependent relationships. You prioritize your mother's needs over yours. You feel guilty if you put your needs first. You need approval from your mother for everything. You feel worthless without your mother. You compare your girlfriends to your mother or your wife. Your mother is jealous of your friends. And you do everything that you can to keep your mother happy. Now, you may exhibit some of these signs without all of them. You may exhibit all of them. And all four of the types that we're looking at are offshoots of the devouring mother type. They all exhibit the other types, some of the aspects of the other types. But the devouring mother uses her feminine power to prevent growth. The mothering instinct is good, but too much mothering instinct is toxic. The dose makes the poison. She's too lenient. She keeps them from developing their own personalities. She keeps them from developing their own abilities. She sets too many boundaries of the wrong type. She gentle parents, which she doesn't use punishment and reward, so they never learn appropriate boundaries. She lets her children get away with very problematic behavior. And just like her children will be weak, dependent, narcissistic, entitled, and they will want instant gratification and give in to every whim. Their entire lives, they've always received these things as a form of love. Love is in quotation marks there. That's not love. She can't let her children go. She discourages them from being all that they can be. She doesn't let them take chances. She always soothes the infant instead of letting him cry it out. Then she continues doing that through being a toddler, through being a child, and further. She destroys her children by overmothering them and by not letting them develop. They're permanent infants. They're permanently dependent. Astarte was a mother goddess, and Jezebel, who was her priestess, continued that tradition. Both were devouring mothers. And the return of Jezebel is going to be the same. Mothering is good, but over-mothering is not good. As Donald Winnicott said, we need more good enough mothers. We need mothers that are good enough. There's a balance. Children need comfort, but they also need challenges. A mother who is only a mother and has no identity outside of being a mother doesn't know how to handle her own anxieties and will project those onto her children. This is one reason that single motherhood is problematic. You eventually have to give your children to the world. Everyone needs a purpose. What if Mary had tried to keep her son from fulfilling his purpose? Where would we be today? We'd be in trouble. The pattern of the devouring mother is not limited to the mother and child relationship. In the modern world, we can see it in business and we can see it in politics by women who see the world through the aspect of being a mother. Now, this doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with women in business and politics, but their instincts can be misused in a way that becomes a problem. I think women in business and politics are necessary and are good. I know one woman who was a manager who was expected to give out performance bonuses, and she was unable to do so because she didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So she gave everyone the same amount. Now, if it were her money, she could do as she pleased. But it was not her money, and she was expected to reward performance, and she just couldn't do it. Egalitarianism as an outcome is bad. Socialist welfare programs and seeing all citizens as children who need to be cared for. These are all targets of the devouring mother. Infants may need 24/7 attention, but if you do that to a 6-month-old or a 1-year old or a 5-year old or your 50-year-old who lives in your basement, that's a problem. The devouring mother creates narcissistic children who feel entitled to everything. And in colleges, most of the woke disciplines are the ones who have the most women. The devouring mother's always looking for predators. Now, women are good at spotting predators. But if a woman misidentifies a predator, it's kind of hard on the predator. It may not be hard on the child, but it is hard on the predator. Well, not a predator. It may create weakness, but it may not if she misidentifies a predator. However, the attention that it generates creates a tendency to cry wolf so that she can be seen as being a better mother. If you oppose me, you're a predator. The problem is, this claim is automatically presumed to be true by society, so it creates attention for her but causes problems for others. Munchausen by proxy is an extreme form of the devouring mother. Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a hard thing to say, but it's a mental health disorder in which a caregiver, usually a mother, makes up or causes illnesses or exaggerates illnesses or injuries to a person under their care who's usually the child. They may lie, they may change test results, they may simply exaggerate. In extreme instances, the actions can bring about death of the child. When a devouring mother acts this way, is to receive the attention that the supposed illness of the child would bring to her and will also create more dependence upon her by the child. Now, the next type that we're going to look at is a little more simple and straightforward, and these are mean girls. These girls are usually pretty cruel. Contrary to popular belief, girls are not always sweet and kind. Sometimes the behavior is antisocial and indirect, but it can often be done socially. It can be subtle, but still aggressive. They may give a compliment that's not really a compliment. If you have teenage girls, I know that you have seen the eye roll. They will smile to your face, but talk behind your back. And this behavior can be carried into adulthood. With girls, the behavior is usually emotional and not physical, although if you read the news, it's becoming physical more and more often. If you see stories about cyberbullying, it's usually girls. They will exclude people from groups. And there are many movies about this type of behavior. Carrie is one that comes to mind, which was a horror movie, but many of the movies are comedies in which the mean girls get their comeuppance. And as usual, movies and other entertainment will distort reality, which means that most people are blind to reality because they've never seen reality. But mean girls are manipulative, which is a common theme among this when we're looking at these types. These mean girls, they often have a magnetic personality. They will have just the right hair, just the right clothes, the right friends, the right car, right neighborhood. They'll get attention. They'll usually be admired by most, but feared by some. These girls are usually very charismatic and full of confidence, which gives them the ability to carry out their mean actions. They'll be outgoing, they'll take charge of social situations, they'll be assertive, they'll be logical, they'll be ambitious, and they'll always be aware of their image. In school, social status is most important, and they often try to carry that out into the real world. Reality shows spotlight these people. Those who watch these shows, they want to be those people. Self-interest is their most important virtue, if you can call it that, and that way she can achieve success by her standards. Now, culturally, these traits are the result of a biological competition for access to the best mates and resources. However, today in the modern culture, the best mates are usually not the best. Standards have changed and not for the better. While males may use physical domination, females use strategy. And that strategy may include tearing down others, and maybe gossiping, maybe aggression that's applied indirectly, such as group exclusion. She might make sure that no one knows that she's competing and even be able to hide her intentions. She may be nice and polite on the outside, but vicious on the inside. She will ally herself with a few select others with whom she's not in direct competition because there's safety in numbers. And if all else fails, then she may resort to verbal or even physical assaults. Men will often support other men, but mean girls, not so much. If someone else is more successful in any area, she may need to be brought down to size. Often women will bond over failures and weaknesses, either real or imagined, while men tend to bond over strength. A woman might say, I'm so ugly. And if she is ugly, other women will comfort her and say, No, you're not. You're a beautiful woman. A man might say, I'm so ugly. And his friends will say, You're just now figuring that out? Yeah, let's go fishing. You know, they're different. And that's why we're looking at this behavior. And that's why Jezebel was so strong. But this antisocial behavior among these mean girls often becomes a cyberbullying. And if you read stories about victims of this, it's mostly girls who are affected and boys who have been emasculated. It will create depression, create anxiety, and in extreme cases, suicidal thoughts. And for whatever reason, girls who grow up in a liberal culture, whether it's their house or city or whatever, they tend to be more susceptible to this. I've not had time to find out why. I've just looked at the numbers on that. Could be correlation, could be causation. I don't know. Now, the fourth and last thing that we're going to look at as we run out of time here is the eternal daughter. This is the girl who never grows up. She remains childlike. She'll be forever vulnerable and dependent. She knows how to use feminine charm to manipulate, just like the other types. She wants things done for her. She's agreeable and obedient, even if she resents it inwardly. She resists growing up. She always expects others to protect her. And she should be protected to an extent, but she should also be ready to protect herself. She not only needs to be rescued, but she wants to be rescued. During pregnancy, childbirth, and breastfeeding, women are dependent by necessity. Women are more vulnerable, both emotionally and physical, especially during times like this, and sometimes more so. And it's normal to ask for help. Men don't like to ask for help. I mean, they might say, Hey, can you help me move the sofa? But they don't want to ask somebody to do for them. Men like to help others. When this dependency goes on too long, or if it's too strong, it becomes a problem. These women are no longer themselves because they conform to others. They act dumb, even if they're not. They will avoid conflict at all costs. And I know a woman, and you probably know some like this as well, who is incapable of providing for herself, even though there's nothing wrong physically. They repress themselves, and they're the most susceptible to groupthink, socialization, and are often left leaning because it gives the feel of a rescuer. The eternal daughter is usually overly sheltered by parents and are prevented from developing independence. And this is not always the result of the devouring mother. Sometimes she is daddy's princess. Now, it's okay and even good for her to be daddy's princess as long as that's not all she is. Did the father think that she should be blindly obedient and beautiful with no individuality and risk taking? Or did he treat her as a princess who didn't mind getting her hands dirty in the shop? The difference there. But the eternal daughter is fragile, and that's a problem because when she meets real life, she will be completely unprepared. She is easily traumatized, and instead of growing up, she needs someone to protect her instead of being an equal partner. The very word helpmeet used in the Bible means a beneficial adversary. She's not ready for that adversity. When she grows up, she is the adult who thinks that little boys should act more like little girls because they're dangerous. Now, in ancient mythology, the goddess Persephone, who was a daughter of Zeus and Demeter, goddess of the harvest, was abducted by Hades to be the queen of the underworld. Her mother missed her and caused the earth to become barren, and her mother made a deal with Hades in which Persephone would spend part of the year with Hades which is fall and winter, and part of the year with her mother, which is spring and summer. And this story rolls the devouring mother and the eternal daughter both into one story. The eternal daughter will remain an eternal child, and children make bad decisions. Women who experience great adversity in childhood are more likely to be the eternal daughter, and it can be real or perceived adversity. So the picture that we are shown by Persephone shows depressive episodes in which there is isolation and detachment. She's overwhelmed by hopelessness, but then she transforms. Now, all women should have some negative femininity, but it has to be integrated. It has to be a complete package. You need to be able to drive that tent peg through the skull of the enemy. If there's only positive, there's no room for contrast. We need the pictures that we see in Lilith, the she demon, in order to appreciate the contrast. If all we have is either the perfect good or the perfect bad, it's a one sided portrayal, and you're going to be blind to the truth. There's a balance. We need to not idolize the negatives, but we need to be aware of them. Along with the Deborahs, we need the Jezebels. And just as we reject toxic masculinity, we must reject toxic femininity. And in order to do that, we must recognize that. People have a tendency to be attracted to the darkness, to the toxic. I'm going to post a link in the description below where they're studying bumblebees. These bumblebees are endangered and they're attracted to toxic soil. They put these toxins in the soil, and the bumblebees will go away from the good soil and towards the toxic. People do the same thing. It's a destructive force that uses harmful behaviors, and it has few limits. As a woman, are you a positive or a negative influence? As a man, to which are you attracted? Jezebel was a negative influence, but she was quite popular. Some of the stuff about her is shocking. We're going to see some of the shock next week. I don't think we're going to be able to get through all of it in 1 week. As a matter of fact, we're out of time now. I was hoping to get further than this. But the Jezebel spirit permeates our society, and we know that it's going to get worse. And the people will like it. They're going to like it just like Ahab liked it. And it's going to destroy us. But you must recognize it and you must resist it. Revelation 16:3, the verse that we started out with. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. And this is not where I wanted to stop, but the next section is kind of long. What do you know about the historic Jezebel besides her name? Most people know it's a name they don't want to be associated with, but don't know anything about her. How about Ahab? Most people think about the song Ahab the Arab. They don't know anything about these people. They don't study the history. How about the spirit that inhabited Jezebel? That's where our world is today. And she's back.